Hi friends, today I am sharing 20 of my best Dollar Tree DIY hacks that you have to try in 2024. These are made with items you should be able to find all year long, and I think you're going to love making these high-end decor pieces on a shoestring budget. For this DIY, I'm going to be using one of the rectangular shaped wood slices, as well as some of these little wood stems from Dollar Tree. This is such an easy DIY and you'll be able to use it all year long. So I'm going to start by removing that jute hanger again from the wood slice and trimming off the extra twine. You're probably wondering why I didn't just cut the twine off to begin with, but I was trying to pull the jute twine to remove the staples to see if it would pull the staples out, but it didn't. It just broke off. The wood grain was different on each side of my wood slice, so I just chose the side that I want to be facing up. And then I picked 4 wood stems that are pretty much the same size because these are going to be used as legs, and I'm just making a little riser to use for decorating. So all that this is going to take is gluing these on with a little bit of hot glue, and that's all there is. It's so easy and it looks so cute. I did have one leg that was a little bit shorter, and so it rocked a little bit, and all I did was take the leg back off, and then I added a little extra hot glue in there just to give it a little more length, and then my little riser was level. I like using risers in decorating because it adds an extra element and it elevates your decor in more ways than one. Another really easy thing to do with these round wood slices is to use them as a base to set a candle or a vase on. And this is just a Dollar Tree vase, and I'm going to add some pine cones in the bottom. And then I have some of this white berry garland from Dollar Tree, and I just have it wound loosely, and I'm going to put it around an LED candle. And I kind of want it to look a little bit sloppy. And then I'm just going to set that down inside there with that garland going around the candle. And then I took one of these wood stems from Dollar Tree, and these can be found usually in the floral section. And I glued that to the top of another one of the round wood slices. And I'm just going to set that on top. Whoops, my candle fell over. I'm just going to set that on top like a little lid so it looks like a little lantern. I think this is really cute for winter. You could change it up and put anything inside this that you want to, but it's just a really simple DIY. For this DIY, I will be making a decorative snowflake. However, you can do this same thing using any wood shape from Dollar Tree, so you can change it up for any holiday or time of year. In fact, I will be doing something similar for Valentine's in my next DIY video, so make sure you're subscribed and be watching for that. For this next project, I'm going to be using one of these wood snowflakes from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be using the round wood slice. I picked up these small wood slices in the floral department at Dollar Tree, and I'll be using one of these. And I'll be using a wood dowel. This one is just a piece of one that I had on hand. It's about 12 inches long and 3/8 inch in diameter. And I'm also going to be using a package of these little snowflake ornaments. For this project, you will need some spray paint. I am using this off-white color of chalk spray paint that I picked up at Walmart. I am going to remove the jute hanger from the snowflake, and I will be filling the hole. I am going to just use some hot glue. My hack for this is to put a metal ruler or something similar underneath on the right side of your project, and then from the back fill it with some hot glue. When that sets up, you pop the ruler off and you end up with a really nice smooth filled hole on the right side of your project. I like this method because it's much faster than using wood filler and having to wait for it to dry and then having to sand it off. Next, I'm going to take my little snowflake ornaments and I'm going to cut the little hangers off of them. And then I'm going to use some double stick tape and I am going to tape them kind of randomly all around the snowflake. I am going to place one right in the center of the snowflake, and then the others I'm just going to kind of place just here and there randomly. And just something to note here is you don't want to cover up the hole that we filled with a snowflake. You want that to be uncovered so that when we spray paint this, the spray paint's going to cover that up. Once I have my snowflakes placed and I'm satisfied with how it looks, I'm going to take it out and I'm going to spray paint this using that off-white paint. And a tip for this is to spray paint it straight down so that your snowflakes don't move. We're using these like stencils, and so going very lightly and gently with the spray paint and spray painting straight down is going to give you a cleaner design. While my paint is drying, I'm going to take my wood round slice and my dowel, and I am going to just remove all of the labels, and then I am going to take a little bit of wood glue. I use the super glue wood glue from Dollar Tree. It works great, and I'm going to put a little bit of that and a little bit of hot glue onto the flattest end of my dowel and just glue that to the center of the wood slice. Now that the paint on my snowflake is dry, I'm going to remove my little snowflake stencils, and this is so satisfying to see this design revealed. I think this is so pretty. It kind of gives it a little bit of a lacy look, and it's just a snowflake shape, but it looks like lace, and it's kind of subtle, and I just really like how that effect turned out. Next, I'm going to take one of those small wood slices and I am going to place it in the center of the snowflake. This is just to kind of carry the design of the base of that round wood slice into the snowflake and just make this project a little bit more cohesive. And so now I'm going to attach my snowflake to the dowel. I'm just using some Gorilla Hot Glue to add this, and it's sturdy enough and strong enough to hold it, and that's all there is to this project. I think this is a really high-end looking piece for not a lot of work, and I love how beautifully it pairs with this snowman as well. For this next project, I will be using the heart-shaped bead wreath from Dollar Tree. If you can't find this, you can use a round one and bend it into a heart shape. I'm also going to be using just some greenery, just as kind of a vine greenery. This is some I had on hand. I think I picked it up at Hobby Lobby on sale, but you can probably find something similar at Dollar Tree. I'll also be using some little pink flowers and some pink and white craft paint. I wanted to paint my wreath in a really light pink color, which I didn't have, so I'm mixing some pink and white together. And I really did this backwards. I should have started with white and just added a very little bit of pink paint to it, but instead I started with pink and then started adding white, and I ended up with way more paint than I needed because I had to keep mixing to get a light enough pink color. But eventually I got to what I wanted, and so I'm just painting the heart using this pink paint. And since the paint dried a little bit darker, it was still just a little bit darker than I wanted it to be. So I decided to just take some of the white paint and dry brush over this lightly to tone it down a little bit more. Now that my paint is dry, I'm going to pull off the little vines from my greenery, and I am going to just start winding them around my heart, and I just secured the ends with a little bit of hot glue and then continued all the way around the heart, adding more greenery, and you can add as little or as much as you like. I went around my heart 2 times, and I left a couple of the ends of the greenery longer and hanging down in the center of my heart. And then I took just a few of those little pink flowers that I had and hung those down from the center as well. Then to make a hanger for my heart, I'm going to use a piece of thin jute twine and just thread that through the wire loop that's already there in the center of the heart and tie that off, and this project is finished. And if you don't care for the pink, you could certainly leave the beads a natural color, or you could paint them white. I'm going to be using these 2 wood rounds that I picked up from Family Dollar. You should also be able to get them in the Dollar Tree Plus section. These are from summer, and I actually got them on clearance for 50% off, so I paid $3 for both of them. I'm also going to be using some wood beads. I'll also be using some of these wood knobs. These are some that I picked up at Hobby Lobby, and they are 1.5 inches in diameter. They're flat on one side, and I actually have 4 of them that I am going to repurpose from another project that are already painted in the exact way I'm going to be making my riser. So this is perfect. The paint I will be using is Rust-Oleum's chalk paint in the color Chiffon Cream. And I'm going to be using some Waverly Antique Wax just to distress this or do some dry brushing on it. And to assemble my project, I will be using the wood glue by Super Glue that I picked up at Dollar Tree and a little bit of hot glue. I'm going to start by removing the twine hanger and the staples that are holding it on. And I did have to use some needle nose pliers to pop these out, but I like that they're just stapled on and I don't have holes to fill. I did start to remove the words from this sign, and then I realized that I really don't need to remove all of it. I just need to remove the parts that are out toward the very edges so that I have space to put my wood beads on. Then I'm going to measure my wood beads all the way around so that I know how many I need to paint. And then once I have that figured out, I'm going to add them to a gallon Ziploc bag. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of my chalk paint to the bag, and then I'll close it up and just squish those beads all around in that paint to coat them. This is what I have found to be the fastest way to paint a lot of these little wooden pieces. Then I'm going to carefully pour them out onto a paper towel, and then I will take another paper towel and just gently kind of blot over the top just to remove any excess paint from them. And once that first coat of paint has dried, then I'm going to add just a little bit more paint into my bag, and I'm going to put the beads back in there and give them a second coat, just basically repeating that process that I just did. After taking them out of the bag the second time, I did use my heat tool to dry them just a little bit and help separate them so they didn't stick together and dry that way permanently. And then I set them aside to finish drying completely. Then I'm going to paint both of the flat sides of my wood rounds using the same chiffon cream chalk paint. And don't forget to paint those edges. And on the other side, I did paint in just about a quarter of an inch all the way around because that's the only part you're really going to see. I didn't worry about painting the rest of that side. Then I'm going to take my antique wax, and you could just use a brown paint for this, but I have this wax and I think it works really well. And so I am going to put this on a dry brush, and I am going to just brush a little bit on each of the beads. I did do these individually. It really didn't take that long, but I found this was the best way to get the look that I was wanting. Then I'm also going to dry brush on my wood rounds on the side that I painted. And I always start really light with my dry brushing, and then I kind of work up to the amount that I want. And so you're just going to lightly brush over this with just a very little amount of paint on your brush. It works best if your brush is dry. That's why it's called dry brushing. And like I said, you can just keep building and adding until you get the look that you want. And here you can see the difference of how it just gives it a little more texture and gives it that worn antique look. Now that I've added the dry brushing to both of my pieces, I'm going to decide which one I want to be the top of my riser, and then I'm going to use the other one and add the feet of my riser to it. I'm adding the feet to the finished painted side of this because if you pick up your riser and turn it over, this will be what you see, and you want it to look nice. So I'm using some of that wood glue and also a little bit of hot glue just to attach these, and I just kind of evenly spaced them so that they would be a good support for my riser. Now I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to start gluing my small wooden beads all around the outside edge. For this, I am only using the wood glue. I didn't try to add a little bit of hot glue to it. There just wasn't enough surface area to make that work and have it not become kind of messy. So I am using the wood glue and putting just a little bit on the end that has the hole on the bead because that has a little bit of a flat surface, and it's going to sit nicely and not try to roll away while I'm gluing these on. And obviously those holes are not going to show on the finished project because they're going to be sandwiched between the two big wood rounds. And then I took a few extra beads and just placed them around kind of in the center so that this would add a little bit of additional support for the second wood round that is going to go on top. So now I'll take my wood glue and just put a little bit on each of the tops of those wood beads all around the outside edge as well as the beads in the center. And now I'll just place that second wood round with the painted finished side facing up down on top of all of those beads that I just put the glue on. I'm going to make sure it's all lined up nice and neat. And then I'm going to put some heavy books on it and let it sit until that glue is completely set. And here is the finished riser styled on my dining room table. I think it coordinates beautifully with my table and I am so happy with how this looks. For this project, I will be using this shelf from Dollar Tree, and you could use any style shelf and basically do the same thing that I'll be doing in this DIY. I'll also be using this set of home letters that I got at Dollar Tree. I'll be using a few of these tumbling tower blocks, but you can use just some other little wood blocks instead if you don't have the tumbling tower blocks. And then I'm going to be using some linen white chalk paint, and I'm going to start my project just by painting the front of my home letters using that paint. It's really only necessary to paint the fronts of these, but if you like to have it completely finished, then go ahead and paint the front and the back. After my paint is dry, I am going to take a little bit of black chalk paint and I'm going to use a dry brush and just a very tiny little bit of paint and just lightly brush onto these. Dry brushing this just gives it that worn, aged look and adds a little bit of texture to it. Now I'm going to take my shelf and just raise up those side wires that are used to hang the shelf. And along the back edge of the shelf, I'm going to take some of these tumbling tower blocks and just line them up, and I'm going to glue them flush with the back of the shelf. And I am making sure that my blocks are not longer than my word is going to be because you don't want them to show. So they are just going to be an extra support to help glue these letters to so that they'll stand up. And I'm just using a little bit of hot glue on this. These letters are so light that there's not going to be a lot of pressure on this, so hot glue is more than adequate for this. Now that I have my blocks glued on, I am going to glue my letters to those blocks, and I'm again just using a little bit of hot glue, and you do want to maybe kind of lay these out prior to gluing them down. So you know I got mine a little off and I ended up having to overlap my H letter just a little bit. Honestly, I kind of like the way it looked overlapped, and I kind of wish I had overlapped a couple of them. But, you know, live and learn. So you might want to do that if you make this as well. This was such an easy project, and I really love how it turned out. In fact, I might make a couple of these to make a set, but I am just really happy with this. For this DIY, I am going to be using this placemat from Dollar Tree, and all of my supplies are from Dollar Tree unless I tell you otherwise. I'm also using a piece of foam core board. This is a scrap from a poster that I had, and I just cut it down to size to fit the placemat. And you can see I didn't round the corners because they're not going to show anyway. And I also will be using some of these 5-gallon paint stir sticks. These I did get from Walmart. They come in a 3-pack for about $1.20 or so. I will be using 12 of these natural wood beads from this bead garland. The paint I will be using is this Rust-Oleum chalk paint in the color Chiffon Cream. I got this from Walmart. It comes in a regular little paint can, but I like to keep it in a jar because I hate dealing with those paint can lids. And I'm going to be using some Waverly Antique Wax. I have a few spring flowers from Dollar Tree. These are just from my stash. I'm trying to use up things that I already have at home, so I just picked out some fun little spring flowers. Now I'm going to take my placemat and I'm going to hot glue it to the foam core board. If you do use hot glue, make sure that you work quickly so that you can smooth out your hot glue and not get any raised areas that show from that glue underneath the placemat. Next, I'm going to cut 2 of my paint sticks down to be the same length as the short sides of my placemat. And so I'm going to just use a pencil and mark where I need to cut those off. And then I'm also going to do the same with 2 paint sticks for the long sides. And then I'm going to use my miter box and saw to cut down my paint stir sticks. All of the crafting tools that you see me use in my video, I do have those linked in the description box below under my favorite crafting tools if you are interested in finding some of those. My newest one is this little handheld vacuum. It is rechargeable, just like with a USB, and it cleans up glitter and sawdust, and it's just really cute and affordable and very helpful. I did take some sandpaper and just smooth out those ends of the paint sticks where I cut them off just to get rid of any splinters. And I should have waited until after doing this to use my little vacuum, but this just means I get to use it again. Next, I'm going to take my Chiffon Cream chalk paint and I'm going to paint my stir sticks. And because I am an impatient crafter, I like to use my heat tool to dry my paint. And just so you know, when your paint is dry, it will no longer feel cold to the touch. So if even after blowing hot air with the heat tool on it, you touch it and it still feels cold, that means it's still not completely dry and you need to dry it a little bit longer. So I was planning on using the Waverly Antique Wax, which is a brown color, to dry brush on my paint stir sticks. But I noticed that the placemat actually has more grays and black in it. So I'm going to use this black chalk paint instead. And I'm going to put just a little bit on a dry brush, take the excess off on a paper towel, and then just lightly brush over my paint stir sticks. This will give it a little bit of an aged look and really give it that farmhouse feel. Once those are dry, I am going to glue those to my placemat to make a frame. So I will start with the shorter sides and just glue those flush with the edges of the placemat. And then the longer sides, I have to hang off of the edge a little bit so that they don't cover up any of the design of my placemat. So I'm just putting a little bit of hot glue on the very ends of those shorter sides and gluing the longer stick to that. So I think this is looking really cute with the frame, but I want to add a little bit of extra embellishment. So I'm going to use some Dollar Tree florals and just add them to the back of the truck. And I thought this would be really pretty if you had dried flowers, but I didn't have any dried flowers on hand, and I'm trying to use what's in my stash. To make a hanger for my picture, I am going to use some of these wood beads and some jute twine, and I'm going to put a little bit of hot glue on the end of my jute twine so I can easily string the beads on it. But I'm just going to put 12 of the wood beads on here. I'm not going to paint them. I'm going to leave them the natural color, and I'm going to put 6 on each side and just tie knots in the end of my jute twine and attach those to the back of the frame about 3 inches in from each side. And I think this just really adds just that cute finishing touch. What a cute wall art piece this placemat made. I love the design. I love the saying. I even love that it says happy on the little license plate on the back of the truck. Such a cute farmhouse spring I love the design. Piece. I love the saying. I even love that it says happy on the little license plate on the back of the truck. Such a cute I picked up this little truck at Family Dollar after the fall season. I paid $2.50 for it. So make sure you're watching for these after the season is over at Dollar Tree Plus or at Family Dollar and see if you can get a deal. I'm also going to be using more of my spring florals for this DIY, as well as some of these small little glass containers and little tin containers. And I'll be using 2 of the wider craft sticks and about a 6-inch piece of dowel. To paint some of my containers, I will be using this Rust-Oleum Forged Hammered Spray Paint in the color Burnished Amber. It looks kind of like a metal finish, and then I'll also be using some of the Waverly Antique Wax. These I both picked up at Walmart. I'm going to start by prepping my little containers. So I am going to be using all 6 of these little metal tins, as well as all 4 of the little glass jars. I'm going to remove the lids from the 4 glass jars, and then I'm going to give them a couple of coats of that metal finish spray paint. For the little tins, I am going to remove the lids off of 3 of those tins, and then I am going to glue the one without a lid to the top of one that has a lid. And then I'm going to actually glue the lid that I took off on the bottom of each of those so that I'm making them taller, but so that the top is open, so I'll be able to put little flowers in it. So hopefully that makes sense, but I'm just creating a taller looking, kind of like a bucket is what I'm kind of going for here. And then I didn't show it here, but I did dry brush a little bit of black paint onto those little metal tins. Next, I'm going to add some florals to my little tins to make different buckets full of flowers. And so before I did that, I decided I did want to add a little bit of jute twine to the top of those glass bottles that I painted. And then I'm going to add just some small pieces of my florals, different color in each bottle or tin. And then I'm going to repeat this until all of my little bottles and tins are full of flowers. So now I'm going to take my little truck and remove all of those fall florals. I love the color of this truck. It's perfect, and it even matches that DIY I did with the placemat from Dollar Tree. So I'm going to remove all of these, and I'm not going to worry so much about not being able to get all of the glue off of the bottom of this because ultimately it's not going to show. So I'm going to take my craft sticks and I'm going to cut off the round end off of one side. Then I'm going to measure and cut that to the same length as the truck bed. And I'll repeat that with the second craft stick as well. Next, I'm going to take my little dowel piece and I'm going to measure so that it sticks up a little bit higher than the craft stick, even leaving a space below the craft stick. And I just marked this and then I'm going to cut 4 pieces the same length. I think they ended up being about 1.5 inches. Then I'm going to take my Waverly Antique Wax and I'm going to give both the craft sticks and the 4 little dowel pieces a nice coat of this. I like this antique wax because it looks like stain. You could use wood stain. You could also use just a brown craft paint watered down a little bit. And so I just paint some on there and then wipe the excess off with a paper towel to give it that nice stained look. Once my little wood pieces are dry, I am going to attach the dowels to the sides of the truck, just 2 on each side. And I'm just eyeballing this. You can measure if you want to, but I just kind of eyeballed it to make sure they were kind of even. And I'm going to attach it using some Gorilla Hot Glue. And then I will attach one of my craft sticks on each side. Then I'm going to arrange all of my little buckets and containers of flowers in the back of the truck. And I did feel like some of them needed to be raised up a little bit. So I got some of these wood rounds that I had on hand from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use them underneath a few of the shorter ones. Just glue those down in the bed of the truck and then glue the little container of flowers on top of those just to raise them up. And then I just attach them all into the back of the truck, and that's all there is to it. I think this is so adorable and I love how it turned out. For this project, I will be using this sign from Dollar Tree, and I really like how it has the 3 panels and it is already pre-stained with that dark wood stain. I'll also be using 2 of these little plastic planters. These come in a 3-pack at Dollar Tree. I'm going to use some florals that I just had on hand. You can use any kind of spring florals that you'd like. And I'll be using my Chiffon Cream Rust-Oleum chalk paint. And also some spray paint, a chalk paint in the same color. The first thing I'm going to do is cut my little planters in half. And so you definitely want to make sure you have the thin plastic planters so that it is easy to do this. I'm going to turn my planter upside down on a piece of paper and trace around the top of the planter. Then I'm going to cut out that circle and fold it in half. This is going to help me determine kind of where the halfway point is on my planter. I'm going to set my planter back on that half circle and mark the edges of the planter with a Sharpie marker right where that fold is on the center of that circle, that paper. And then I'm going to just kind of eyeball a line that goes up and over the planter at the halfway point, just trying to get this as straight as possible. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but just close. Then I'm going to use my razor knife and cut the planter in half along that line. It is a little bit stubborn along the rim and then the bottom of the planter, just because the plastic is thicker there. So I did take a pair of wire cutters and kind of snip that to cut through the rim. Do want to be careful though, because you can crack the planter. And I am cutting both of the little planters in half. Now that I have my planters cut in half, I'm going to use a pair of scissors and just try to even up the edges a little bit, because I want them to be as flat as possible so that they will sit flush up against my sign. I am just using 3 halves of the planters, and now I'm going to take them out and give them a good couple of coats of this spray paint. While I'm waiting for my spray paint to dry, I'm going to take my sign and I'm going to use a little bit of that chiffon cream chalk paint and dry brush some of that on top of the sign, just to kind of tone down the dark brown wood stain that's already on that and give it more of a farmhouse look. I did end up giving my planters about 3 light coats of spray paint, and now that that's completely dry, I'm going to use some Antique Wax by Waverly and this little dry chippy brush from Dollar Tree. This is the best brush for dry brushing, and I'm going to go over my planters to distress them and antique them as well. And now I'm going to attach my pots to the sign. I am leaving about 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch at the bottom of the sign, and I'm using some hot glue to attach this, just trying to be very careful not to get too much glue so it's not squishing out the sides. Now that I have my pots on my sign, I'm going to take my florals and decide which ones I want to put in which pots. Just going to cut off the pieces of the florals and just start arranging them in the little pots. I really love how farmhouse this is. I love that I can change it out for the different seasons. And it was just really simple and quick and easy and inexpensive to make. For this project, I will be using this unfinished wood cross that I picked up at Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be using these little laser cut words also from Dollar Tree. In fact, everything, including this garland, is from Dollar Tree, except this greenery. I had this on hand. And this sign is also from Dollar Tree. I love the finish on this and the size. For $1.25, that's an amazing deal. I'm going to start by removing the jute twine hanger and the label off of the back of the cross. I guess I really didn't need to remove the label because it's not going to show at all, but it's just a habit. Next, I'm going to take my little berry garland and I'm going to kind of figure out the size and how much I need to go around about 3 times and trim that off. And then I am going to just wind that and my little pieces of greenery into a wreath. And so this is just really easy to do. You don't need any extra wire. You can just use that garland because it is wired to form the wreath. So now I'm going to use some jute twine and I'm going to wrap that around the top of the wreath probably 6 or 7 times. And then I'm going to put it through the hole in the top of the cross and wrap it around through that hole over the top of the cross about 3 or 4 times just to hang it from that cross and just fill up that hole and kind of disguise it. And then I'll secure that on the back using some hot glue and trim off the excess twine. I'm going to position the cross more toward the left side of the sign so that I have room for my word rejoice on the right side. Then I'm going to attach both of these pieces using my Gorilla Hot Glue. I'm really liking the way this project looks with the natural wood tones. What do you think? Would you like to see it with more color or are you liking the natural look as well? Leave me a comment and let me know. For this project, I will be using a mirror from Dollar Tree as well as a pizza pan. I'll also be using some wood beads and a straw hat. This is one that I had on hand already. I picked it up at Family Dollar, but you can also get them in several different colors at Dollar Tree. And I will also be using some spray paint in an off-white color. I'm going to start by removing the back of the mirror so that this will just separate the mirror from the frame so that I can paint the frame. I will also be painting the pizza pan, so I'm going to remove the label off of that, and I'm going to be using actually the back of the pizza pan, so that's what I'm going to paint. I did several light coats of paint and I actually only painted the one side, the back side of the pizza pan. So I'm going to be adding some of my straw hat to the pizza pan. So I'm going to remove that ribbon that was around the hat and then I am going to cut off the brim of the hat. Once I have the brim cut off, then I'm going to lay it on the back side of that pizza pan and I'm going to decide how much of this brim I need to use. And so basically I just want it to be the size of the pizza pan and enough or wide enough so that when I put the mirror in the center, I don't see any of the white pizza pan.
Then I'm going to just adhere this to the pizza pan using my hot glue gun. And I would definitely recommend wearing a finger protector when you are gluing this down because there are a lot of holes in the straw hat where the hot glue seeps through and it's pretty easy to burn yourself. I did make a cut in the circle of the brim of the hat so that it was easier to finish it off, and then where it didn't fit quite on the pan, just because of the way the brim laid, I trimmed that off, and then I just glued down my seam and tried to make it as seamless as possible. And you don't need to worry if the outer edge of the brim of the hat is not perfect along the outer edge of the pizza pan, because we are going to cover that up with the wood beads. So I've gone ahead and strung some wood beads on a string so that they are the perfect length to go around the brim of the hat or the outside edge of the pizza pan. And I don't want the string to show, so I am going to just cut off the string and hot glue it inside the beads that are on the end to hold it together. This way there won't be any knots showing in between the beads, but I can still leave them on the string, which makes it so much easier to attach it to the project. Then I'm going to attach my string of beads around the outside edge of the pizza pan using some hot glue. And I'm not gluing down every bead, I'm just adding some hot glue every few inches or so. And now I'm going to take my mirror and add it back into my frame, and then I'm going to attach it to the center of my pizza pan using some hot glue. And then I need to add a hanger to the back, and I found this one in my stash. I cannot remember what these are called, but I know I probably got it in a package at Walmart. And I'm going to add some E6000 and attach that to the top of my backside of my mirror, and then I'm going to let that dry overnight. I think this makes a beautiful wall decor piece, but I also have another way that I'm going to show you how to use it, so make sure you keep watching. All right, on to the next DIY, and I'm going to be using this hat from Dollar Tree as well as some of the scraps from the hat that I used for that mirror. Also, I'm going to be using a couple of different styles of little lanterns that I've gotten at Dollar Tree. These I just had in my stash, but I know that you can find different styles at different times at Dollar Tree. And I'll be using some jute twine. I'm going to start with this little lantern. I don't want to leave it white, so I am going to be painting it using this Rust-Oleum Forged Hammered Burnished Amber spray paint. Say that fast 3 times. And I'm going to paint the base and the top, but I don't want to paint those little cross bars in the center because I think they'll show through my straw hat more if I do. So I'm going to leave them white, so I'm just putting some painter's tape over them to protect them from the spray paint, and then I'm going to spray this and just a couple of light coats to go over it, and then you'll notice that this spray paint has like a texture to it, and that's why it's called the forged hammered spray paint. It has kind of a hammered metal look, and I really like that. While my paint is drying, I am going to take my hat and I'll remove the ribbon around the hat, and then I'm just going to find the little end and snip the thread that's holding it together, and then it just pulls apart. And this is great for crafting because you can pull this apart and have a whole bunch of like straw ribbon to use for DIYs. And through the magic of video, my spray paint is dry. I'm going to remove the painter's tape, and then I am going to start adding my straw ribbon. And so I'm just tacking it down with a little hot glue, and then I'm going to just wrap it around my lantern. Now I did have to kind of angle it a little bit to wrap as I worked my way down. And so if you want your lines to be straight across, then you might want to just work in strips. So like add one round and then cut it off and then move down and add another one. But as you can see, I just wrapped it, and even though it was angled a little bit, I kind of liked that look. It didn't bother me at all. So it's just whatever you prefer. And then when I got to the end, I just added a little hot glue to secure that down and then trimmed off the excess. And there's a little hole on the top where there used to be a hanger that I had removed when I used this for another project. So I am just adding a little bit of jute twine and just making a simple little hanger just to finish it off, just a little extra detail. And then I added a different little LED tea light to it that was brighter than the one that came in it, and I think it looks great. For my other little lantern, I'm going to be using some of that darker colored straw hat that I used in my mirror project. And then I'm going to wrap it around my other little lantern the same way that I did the first one. I also added a little piece around the top of this lantern as well. I removed the silver little hanger from the top of this lantern, so I wanted to add a little bit more of an embellishment on the top. So I took some jute twine and I am making a tassel. I did this by wrapping the twine around my fingers about 8 times or so, and then I'm tying another piece of jute twine to the top of my circle, holding it all together, and that's going to be the string that I am going to add some beads to. And then I'm tying another piece of twine just a little ways down, kind of to make a little neck of my tassel, and then I'm trimming off the bottom to kind of even it up. Then I'm going to take some wood beads and add them to my longer piece of twine above the tassel. And then once I decide how long I want that to be, I'm going to tie a knot in the same place over and over again so that I get like a big knot. And that's what I'm going to use to glue to the top of my lantern. And I just love how the light looks shining through the holes of the straw hats. I just think this looks so cool. And as promised, I want to show you another way to use that mirror. It can be used as a tray, and I think it looks amazing paired with these little lanterns. I love the way the light looks reflecting in the mirror, and I think this makes just a gorgeous centerpiece. For my next project, I will be using this little wooden birdhouse from Dollar Tree, and I'll be using one of the wood crates from the Crafter Square aisle that is about this same size as the birdhouse. I'll also be using various wood stems from Dollar Tree, but you could use various pieces of sticks from your yard. They don't have to be the ones from Dollar Tree. And I'm going to be using a couple of pine cones as well as just a piece of bark that I also got out from one of the trees that we cut down. I'm also going to be using some pieces of bamboo, which I am getting from the handle of this butterfly net that I picked up at Dollar Tree. So I'm going to be removing that plastic coating and using the bamboo handle. And I'll also be using just some plain Spanish moss. I'm going to be painting my birdhouse and wooden crate using this pretty green acrylic craft paint, and then I'll also be using some of the wood glue. So to start out, I'm just going to paint both my birdhouse and the crate using this green craft paint. I'm not going to paint the bottom of the birdhouse yet, and I'm not going to paint one of the ends of the wood crate because I'm going to be gluing those two together, and so you just get a better bond if you're just gluing the wood to wood instead of onto the paint. I did decide to go ahead and give the roof of my birdhouse a coat of brown chalk paint, and I'm going to be gluing some things on the top of the roof, but I just wanted to give it a more finished look, so I am going to paint it with the brown paint. I'm going to set that aside to dry, and then I'm going to paint my little wood crate. And again, like I said, I didn't paint one of the ends of the crate, and then I'm also not going to paint the inside of the crate. I did decide to paint around the rim of the top of the crate though, because that just gives it a really nice finished look. Since this is going to be outside, I am going to take both the birdhouse and the little crate and spray the painted surfaces using a clear matte sealer. So now I'm going to take my little birdhouse and I'm going to add a little bit of detail to the roof. I decided that I wanted to add some of these little wood pieces to the roof. These were some I found at Dollar Tree. They're called wood slices, but they're really more like dowels, but they were the perfect size for this. And so I'm going to use these, but you could use sticks or moss or anything that you wanted to embellish this with, or you could just leave it plain. I am using a combination of the wood glue and the hot glue to put these on just because it is going to be outside, and if you only use hot glue, when the sun heats that up, it's going to soften the glue and it may come apart. So I started at the bottom of the roof and I worked up toward the gable peak of the roof, and then I'm going to take one last piece of these wooden dowels, slices, whatever they are, and I am going to just put it through the hanger and glue it to the peak of the roof, and that's going to finish it off. Next, I'm going to add some wood glue to the end of the crate that I did not paint, and I'll add a little bit of hot glue as well, and then I'm going to glue that to the bottom of the birdhouse. So by now you are probably wondering, what in the world are you making? Well, this is going to be an insect house for my flower garden. It's good to have a place where beneficial insects can find a habitat, and so this is just a really cute way to provide that. So while that glue is drying, I am going to take my butterfly net and I am going to remove that plastic wrap that is around the bamboo handle so that I can use that bamboo. And this was really easy. I just took a razor knife and just slit the plastic and then pulled it off. It came off really easily. And then I'm going to cut my bamboo handle into pieces that are the length of the depth of my little crate. So I'm just marking that, and I am going to use these miter shears. These are one of my favorite tools. I wasn't sure that these would work for this, and they cut through this bamboo just super easily. And so I was really impressed. I love this tool. If you don't have one, you should get one. I'll link them in the description box below. So now I'm going to start arranging all of my miscellaneous kind of natural things into my little box. And the reason I am doing this is because this will provide like a natural habitat for the insects to get into, and the various shapes of things allows all the different crevices and different size holes and things, places where bugs like to hide. And so obviously, lots of people don't like bugs, but there are beneficial insects. I love ladybugs because they eat all of the little aphids that get on your rose bushes and on your peonies. And so, you know, they do have a purpose, and so providing a habitat for the beneficial bugs in your garden can be a good thing. So I'm just going to start kind of layering my different types of things in my crate. I am not gluing them down. I don't want to put any glue in here. I want this all to just be natural things here in this area. And so I'm going to try and pack it pretty tightly so that everything just kind of holds itself in. And so I'm kind of squishing those two pine cones together and then forcing them down into the crate. And I did put a few sticks underneath them to kind of hold them out toward the front. And then I just continue to build and layer all of my different pieces of wood and bark and pine cones into the little crate. This was actually very like therapeutic. It was kind of fun. It was like putting a puzzle together. And so just finishing up with some of those bamboo pieces because they have the hole through them naturally, and adding some of that bark. I'm also going to just take my Spanish moss and fill the top of the birdhouse with that, just to kind of hide the unpainted part in the back of the birdhouse, and then also to give some natural elements to the top of the birdhouse as well. And then I did decide that those three larger pieces of wood needed some holes in them for bugs to get into as well. So I decided to just take my drill and drill out a few different size holes in them. And I just think this looks so cool, and what a fun way to provide a little habitat for the beneficial insects that help out in your garden. I hung this outside by my rose bush, and I just love how natural it looks, and it's just super cute. If you are enjoying this video so far, if you would do me a big favor and hit that like button, it really helps my channel and helps other people to see this video as well. I found this unfinished wood tray at Family Dollar for just $5, and so I'm going to be using this for my next project. And then I'm also going to be using these self-adhesive tiles from Dollar Tree. I'm using 3 sheets of those. I'll be painting my tray with some linen white chalk paint and using some matte finish Mod Podge as well. I'm going to give my wood tray a couple coats of the white chalk paint. I'm not going to paint the bottom inside of the tray because I'm going to be sticking my adhesive tiles onto that, and so I don't want the paint to kind of mess with how well those adhere, so I'm just going to leave that the natural wood so I can attach my tiles, and hopefully they'll stick really well to that. Once the paint is dry, I'm going to adhere my tiles, but before I do that, I'm just using a damp rag and cleaning off that surface to make sure it doesn't have any loose particles, and then I'm going to use my heat tool just to make sure that it's nice and dry. I'm going to cut off the edges of the tile so that I still have the backing on it, so I can kind of lay it out and see how I want to put these down. Then once I have an idea of that, I can peel off the backing and actually stick them down. You could use any pattern of the self-adhesive tiles that they have, but I chose this one because I loved the color and the pattern, but I also thought it would be easy to put on the tray without having a lot of seams showing. I'm going to start by taking one of the tiles and peeling it off and sticking it down in one corner. Then I'm going to take the tile that I trimmed the edges off and just kind of place it in there to see where I need to trim it off so it fits. So I will mark that and then I will cut it down to size. I first tried to use a razor knife and a straight edge to cut this, but I wasn't getting a really clean cut, so I did kind of go over it a couple of times with the razor knife, but then I did use my scissors to trim it up and make sure I had a nice clean cut. Then I just made sure that that fit the space I wanted it to go in and peeled it off and stuck it down. So now I'm left with a strip along one edge that I need to cover, which is why I thought this pattern would work well. So I'm just using a scrap to mark the width of that, and then I will just kind of determine what the best way to fill that in is. And then I'll trim my pieces and cut them and stick them in there. So this looks great the way it is, but I'm going to add a little extra detail by dry brushing some of the white chalk paint over the top of this. This is just going to give the tiles a little bit more of an aged look, just a little bit more of a, I don't know, a more realistic look, I think. And so I'm just lightly going over the top of those. Then I'm going to take my matte finish Mod Podge and I'm going to go over this with a couple of coats just to seal that paint that I put on the top, but also to seal the seams of the tiles and just to help make this a more functional tray. And I decided to actually go ahead and seal the whole tray, all the sides and everything. For the finishing touch, I'm going to take some jute twine. I'm going to attach it on the underside of the handle, and then I'm going to wrap it around and around until I get the width and thickness that I want. And I just think this adds up the perfect finishing touch for this tray. For this project, I will be using these brown paper bags from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using a sheet of heavy cardstock. And if you use more than 8 bags for your book, you will need more than 1 sheet of the heavy cardstock. You will also need several sheets, at least 2, possibly more if you use more bags for your book, of coordinating scrapbook paper. I'll also be using some miscellaneous embellishments, such as some paper flowers, some ribbon, some stickers, and so you can use anything that you have on hand to decorate your album. I'm going to use 10 bags for my book, but if you use 8, then you will only need 1 sheet of that heavy cardstock, and your materials actually come out a little more even. I just like the size of using 10 bags for mine. The bags as they are a little bit long for a nice album size, so I'm going to be cutting them down. I am going to measure from the bottom of the bag because it's more of a straight edge, and I'm going to measure 8 inches, and then I'm going to cut off the tops of the bags. You could just use regular scissors for this, but I like kind of a rougher edge on this project, so I'm going to be using these decorative scissors that kind of look like torn paper. If you don't have these, you could carefully tear your paper along this line, but these scissors make it really easy to get a fun edge that looks like it's torn paper. Then I'm going to just use that bag as a guide to cut all the rest of my bags down. For the next step, I am going to take a glue stick and I'm just going to glue down the little flaps from the bottom of the bag just so that they lay flat and I don't have them trying to fold up on me. Before I attach all of my bags together, I want to punch some holes in the bottom end of the bags. This is going to be so that I can thread some ribbon through that and tie it together so it actually looks like my album is tied together and not just glued together. So I'm going to measure 3/4 of an inch from the bottom of the bag and place a mark. And this is just going to give me a reference for where to place my ruler. And then I'm going to measure 1 inch in from each side of the bag and put a mark, and that's where I'm going to punch my holes. And then I can just use that first bag as a reference to place on top of my other bags to punch the holes in the rest of them. And I love this little USB rechargeable desk vacuum. It is so great for cleaning up things like this. It works so well. I'll leave a link for you. It's definitely a must-have for any crafter. Next, I'm going to take a patterned paper that I've chosen as the cover of my book, and I'm going to cut out a piece the size of my paper bag, and then I'm going to just glue that on top of one of the bags. And then I'll go ahead and just flip it over so I can see where those holes are and punch holes through that. So I'm going to place the bag with my pattern paper on top of the stack, and then the bag that is on the bottom of the stack, I'm going to go ahead and flip it over so I don't have that seam showing. So it's just a nice smooth side. You could put a pattern paper on the back side as well. I did not do that, and I don't think that it really makes that much difference, but it just is a personal preference, whatever you like. Then I'm going to start gluing my bags together, and I'm going to use this Elmer's extra strength glue stick. I think you could just use a regular glue stick, but I like the extra strength glue. It really holds it together well, and especially if you're giving it as a gift, you want it to stay together and not come apart. So I would recommend this glue for this project. So now I have all the bags glued together, and then when I open it, it will look kind of like a little accordion with all of these pockets in it. Next, I'm going to take my crocheted ribbon. You can use any ribbon or twine even for this, and I'm going to thread it through my holes and then just tie a knot. And this is really an optional step to put the holes in this and tie this on, but I think it just adds an extra embellishment that kind of elevates this project. It makes it look like it's tied together even though it's actually just glued together, and I just think it looks really nice and gives it a finishing touch. I also decided to add this little charm to the knot before I finished tying it, and then I trimmed off the ends of my ribbon. So here's where you can get totally creative with this. You can leave it as plain as you'd like or embellish it as much as you want. You can make this in any style, maybe depending on who you're making it for, or just if you're keeping it for yourself, what your preference is. Obviously, I'm going for more of a vintage or kind of romantic style here. And so it's just really up to you and what supplies you have on hand. I used some paper flowers and I held them together with a little brad, and then I also decided to use the frame from this sticker sheet to put around my flower. Now I'm going to cut my cardstock for my tags that are going to go inside my book. And to do this, I'm just going to use my paper trimmer and cut my 12 by 12 piece in half. Then I'm going to cut each half in 4 3-inch strips. So I have 8 pieces that are 6 inches by 3 inches. So this is why I said that if you use more than 8 bags for your book, you will need more than 1 sheet of this cardstock. Then I'm going to do the same thing with my patterned scrapbook paper, and I am covering both sides of the cardstock using the scrapbook paper, and so I'm using twice as many pieces of the scrapbook paper as I did the cardstock. And again, you can get creative with this and mix and match your patterns. You can use all the same pattern. It's really up to you. Then I'm going to take my piece of cardstock and I'm going to glue one of the patterned papers on one side, and then I'm doing a different pattern on the other side. I want these to look like tags, so I'm going to go ahead and just take my scissors and trim off the corners of one end just to make it look like a tag. And then I'll take my hole punch and punch a hole in the top as well. I used several different types of strings and ribbons to tie in the tops of my tags. I really liked kind of the eclectic look using different ones, but you could use all of the same too. And then you can add pictures or memories or different things to these tags, and they just fit in the little pockets of your book. and it just makes such a cute and different way to make a little photo book. For this project, I will be using 3 of these wall shelves from Dollar Tree. These are approximately 13 by 5 inches. I will also be using 16 feet of this macrame cord that I picked up at Dollar Tree. You could also use something like this braided cotton cord from Ace Hardware. I will be using several small pieces of jute twine as well as some brown craft paint. And you will need some hooks to hang your shelves with. I have these that I'm planning to use. These are just some coat hooks that I picked up at Walmart. I'm going to start by sanding off any rough edges or splinters on all of my shelves. Then I'm going to take a little bit of water and I'm going to add just a little bit of my brown craft paint to that water. Basically, I'm making my own stain. I prefer to do this instead of using an actual stain. I just think it's easier to work with and it's a lot easier to clean up. So I'm going for a pretty light colored stain here. So I'm just doing a few tests to see if I like the color, and I did add a little bit more paint to my water, and once I got kind of the look that I want, I'm going to go ahead and paint all of my shelves. One thing I really like about this technique is I think it's very easy to control how dark you get your stain on your wood because you can go over it several times to darken it, and it's just really easy to control. And because I'm impatient and because it is pretty wet since my paint is very watered down, I am using my heat tool to dry this in between coats. And I love using my heat tool for crafting, for drying paint and stain and things like that. So I will leave that linked if you are interested. All of my favorite crafting tools are linked in the description box below. So here's what my shelves look like after one coat of my stain. So I did want them a little bit darker, so I'm going over them with a second coat. So I figured out all of the measurements and drew out a diagram and just kind of scratched it out on a pad. I am going to leave a link in the description box to a much neater diagram with all of the measurements for you so that you can download that or print it and have that to reference. Because this project is a little bit more complicated and I did have to refer to my diagram several times, so I'm sure that you'll want to have that as well. So I will be using 16 feet of this cotton twine, and I am going to cut one piece that is 72 inches long, another piece that is 48 inches long, one piece that is 28 inches long, and 2 pieces that are 24 inches long. And those will be listed on that diagram that you can download. I'm going to start with my 72-inch long piece, and I am going to put the two ends together and fold it in half to find the center. Then I am going to measure 1 inch from the folded center point and put a little bit of hot glue just to form a loop. Now I'm going to take a small piece of jute twine and just down 1 inch from that folded top, I'm going to wrap it around about 5 times and secure it with some hot glue. And I'm doing this just to give it kind of a finished and high-end or elevated look. And so if you prefer not to use the jute twine, that's completely up to you. And I did repeat this process for both the 48-inch piece and the 28-inch piece. So basically the three longer pieces will all be folded in half and the jute twine wrapped around the top. So now we're going to assemble this, which can be a little bit confusing, so I will do my best to explain this, and the diagram will help with this as well. I'm going to start with my top shelf, and on the left side I am going to use the longest piece of twine, so the one that was 72 inches that we folded in half. I'm going to be using that. And I did put a little bit of hot glue on the ends of the piece of twine and kind of twisted them just to help me get them through the holes of the shelves a little bit easier. So I'm just putting the twine through the holes at this point. I'm not tying any knots or securing it in any way. So I will have that longest piece on the left hand side, and then on the right hand side I'm going to be putting the 28-inch piece. So folded in half, it would be 14 inches. So that is the one that I'm going to be threading through those right hand side holes. And I'm just using a stylus to kind of make sure my holes are cleaned out of any splinters or anything, so that it's easier to get the twine through. And then again, I'm putting the hot glue on the ends of the twine to help thread it through as well. So to figure out where to tie the knots for my cord, I'm going to hold the cord up so that the back piece is straight up and down, and it should be 12 inches from the top of the shelf to the top of the cord. And I'm going to tie a knot on the bottom of the shelf to hold the cord in place. Now, I used a Sharpie marker on the bottom side of my shelf to mark the twine where I had figured out what length I thought it should be, and that way when I tied my knot I could see where that mark was on the cord, and that should line up at the bottom of the shelf. And I know this is a little bit confusing, but it will kind of make sense as you're doing it. And so the main thing here is to remember that the cord that is on the back of your shelf, which will be up against the wall, needs to be straight up and down. And so the cord that is going to the front hole of your shelf is actually going to be a little bit longer. So you can see it's more of at an angle, whereas the back cord is more straight up and down. And like I said, it will kind of make sense as you put it together, but you have to do it this way so that your shelf will be level. Then I'm going to repeat the same thing on the left-hand side of my shelf. Now the cords are longer on this, so I want the cords that are on top of the shelf obviously to be the same length on both sides so that it hangs level. So I'm going to just repeat what I just did on the right hand side and tie my knots, but the only difference is I will have some long cords hanging down at the bottom of my shelf on the left hand side. One thing that I found very helpful was to actually put this up on the wall, and so I put some pins in the wall 12 inches apart, and I hung this up to make sure that it was going to hang straight or level, and this just kind of gave me confidence that I was on the right track. So this is what it should look like at this step, with the shelf with the long cords hanging down on the left hand side. So I took my shelf down, and now on the bottom side of this shelf I am going to find the center point. So I'm just going to measure lengthwise and mark the center, and then I'm going to measure widthwise and mark the center, so I find the exact center point of this shelf. Then I'm going to take one of the 24-inch long pieces of cord, and I'm going to go ahead and put a little hot glue on the ends of that. Then I'm going to fold it in half and glue the center point to that center mark that I put on the bottom of this shelf. I'm just using some Gorilla hot glue, but I will also be using my staple gun to staple this so that it has a stronger hold. I am putting a cutting board underneath this just to make sure, in case a staple goes through, that it protects my work surface. I did measure this. I'm using 1/4-inch staples, and it should be fine for this. I did also a test on another just shelf that I had, and so the 1/4-inch staples seem to work fine for this. So now I'm going to move on to my next shelf. This will be the middle shelf, and on the right hand side of this shelf I will be using the 48-inch cord that we cut and divided in half and wrapped the twine around the top. So this cord, again, I'll put some hot glue on the ends, thread it through those right hand side holes, and then I'm going to be tying some knots on this. The measurement will be 22 inches from the top of the shelf to the top of the cord for the cord that's in the back hole of the shelf. And again, that back cord is going to be more straight up and down, while the front cord is going to be at an angle and a little bit longer. So here's where it gets a little bit tricky. The left side of that middle shelf is going to be attached to the cord that we stapled to the bottom of the top shelf. So now I'm going to thread the ends of those into the holes on the left side of that middle shelf. The space between these two shelves should be 10 inches, and the tough part with this is keeping them upright while you're trying to measure, but it should be 10 inches in between the shelves. So when you get that situated, then you can tie the knots on the bottom of that middle shelf on those cords on the left side. And again, I hung my shelf up to make sure that it was looking good and everything was still straight and level. And when you hang this, the hook at the top on the far right is 6 inches from the center hook. And since everything is looking good, now I'm going to measure and find the center point of the bottom of the middle shelf. Just like we did with the top shelf, I'm going to measure and mark that middle spot on that middle shelf, and then I am going to go ahead and attach the other 24-inch cord to the bottom of this middle shelf, just like I did on the top shelf. This cord is going to be what I use to attach my bottom shelf with on the right hand side. So I'm going to grab that third shelf and I'm going to thread the cord through the right hand side holes of this shelf. And then those long cords that were hanging down on the left hand side of our very top shelf are going to be threaded through the left hand holes on this bottom shelf. And so once I get those through the holes, now I'm using some spray paint cans to kind of hold up all my shelves to get them all lined up, just so I can try and measure and make sure that everything is even and level before I tie off my knots. And as you can see, this was a little bit precarious, but I got it figured out. And so the measurement in between the top shelf and the bottom shelf should be 20 inches. So that's what I'm measuring here, just to make sure that I have that correct. And then I'll go ahead and tie my knots. And when I hung this up to check it and make sure it was right, the bottom shelf did not want to hang right. It was kind of hanging out away from the wall on the right hand side a little bit. And so I just noticed that I needed to make that front right cord a little bit shorter. So I just adjusted the knot on that, and then it hung just fine. And here I have mine hanging just temporarily with some T-pins. You definitely would want to use something like those coat hooks to hang it more permanently so that it would be stronger as well. For this project, I will be using a cooling rack from the baking section at Dollar Tree, one of the wall shelves. This again is the approximately 13 by 5 size. And I will be using one 12-inch wood dowel. You can purchase these in a package of, I believe it's 12 at Dollar Tree. I'll be using some wood filler as well as some stain or brown paint. I think I'm just going to use the brown paint, but you could use stain. And I'll be using some black spray paint. These wire cooling racks come with bent wires on them that act as feet to hold the rack up off the table or counter. And I want to keep 2 of them on one end of the rack, but the ones on the other end, I am going to actually cut out using some wire cutters, and these cut out pretty easily. Next, I'm going to use my shelf to help me bend up the end that I just cut those wires out of. And you do want to make sure that the other bent wires are facing up. When you do this, you want those facing up, and you're going to bend this bottom section up as well. And so I'm just using the shelf as a guide to help me bend the wire. It is a little hard to get started, but once you get it started, it bends fairly easily. And so here you see I have it at a 90-degree angle. This is going to be used as a support for my shelf. Now I'm going to go give my cooling rack a couple of coats of that black spray paint. And while that's drying, I am going to use my wood filler to fill the holes on the shelf. I'm filling the holes on both sides, and then once that filler has dried, I will sand it off so it's nice and smooth, and I'll do this on both sides. And then it's ready for a coat of stain or paint. I was thinking a stain would be pretty, but honestly, I like using the paint, mixing it with water, and kind of making my own stain, just because I think it's easier to work with and it's much cleaner. It also doesn't smell as bad. I did do 2 coats of the black spray paint on my cooling rack, and then I did a couple coats of a clear sealer on it as well to help keep that paint on the rack. So now I'm going to attach my shelf to the cooling rack. So I'm going to turn this over and hang the long edge over the edge of my desk. But first I'm going to put down a cutting board because I will be using my staple gun to attach the cooling rack to the shelf. I'm going to measure and make sure I have that rack centered on the shelf, just making sure that I have the same amount of the shelf hanging over on each side. And I always like to wear my safety glasses when I'm using the staple gun. That's always a good idea. And then I'm going to use my staple gun to attach this wire rack to the shelf. Now I'm going to take my 12-inch dowel and I am going to slide it in where those other bent wires are at the top of the cooling rack, and this is going to make a little hanging rod. Just a disclaimer here, this shelf is not really strong, so you don't want to put anything too heavy on the shelf, but you could hang some mugs from the dowel using some S-hooks and set some little coffee pods or something on the shelf. You could also use this in a bathroom or bedroom to hang jewelry on. I think it works pretty well for that. Let me know in the comments what you would use this little shelf for. This little wagon is one of my all-time favorite DIYs that I have done, and it is so versatile. You can leave it out all year long and just change up what you put inside of it for the different seasons. I first made it for fall and then I changed it up for Christmas, and I am so looking forward to changing it for spring and summer. So let me show you how I made it. For this project, I will be using 4 of the paper towel holders from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using these 2 pallet signs that I picked up from Family Dollar. If you have Dollar Tree Plus, they may have these signs as well. These were $3 each, but Family Dollar and Dollar Tree are owned by the same company, so be sure you check both stores. I'll also be using this wire paper tray as well as a rectangular sign board. This is just one that I had in my stash that I'll be using. I also had this 1x2 piece of wood in my stash. I think it's about 9 inches long or so. It doesn't have to be exact. And then I'll also be using some of these black zip ties from Dollar Tree. I also picked up 3 packages of the 5-gallon paint stir sticks from Walmart. These are the larger ones. There's 3 to a package, and we will be using all 9 stir sticks. And for paint, I'm going to be using a black spray paint and this brown color called Nutmeg, which is perfect for painting things that you want to look more wood colored. I will be using my Stanley staple gun. I love this tool, and all my favorite crafting tools are linked below. But if you don't have this, you can use a strong bonding glue such as E6000, and then you'll need some wood glue as well. To start out, I'm going to be removing the tags from my paper tray and also the labels off of my sign board. If the labels don't want to come off easily, I do recommend using a heat tool or blow dryer to help get those off. We don't want to tear this because we do want a nice smooth surface. Once I have the labels off, I am going to measure the width of my paper tray, and then I'm going to cut my sign board down so that it will fit down inside my paper tray. If you are a regular subscriber, thank you so much for coming back and watching this video. If you are new to my channel, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Chantel and I love to do Dollar Tree DIYs and DIYs on a budget. So if you enjoy those types of things, make sure that you're subscribed and have your notifications set so that you won't miss any of my future projects coming up. So I'm just using a straight edge and a razor knife to cut my sign board down. These cut pretty well. You have to go over them a few times and then you'll be able to just kind of bend it and cut through to get a nice straight edge. And now that I have the width correct, I'm going to mark the length and I'm going to cut the sign board down that direction as well. And I'm making sure to cut off the end that has the holes where the hanger was so that I don't have to worry about filling any holes. Once my sign is cut down to size, I'm just going to take some sandpaper and run over the edges just to clean those up. Then I'm going to take my sign board and my wire paper tray and I am going to give them both a coat of the nutmeg spray paint. I'm also going to take my 4 paper towel holders and I'm going to spray them with the black spray paint. And with this sign, I did not worry about sanding off the glitter or the design on the one side of the sign because it's not really going to matter on this project, so I didn't figure I needed to spend the time and energy to do that. But I am going to spray both sides of the sign and then also the wire basket. Mostly just the sides of it is what needs to get sprayed because that's really all that's going to show. And I did use a couple of coats of the spray paint on all of these pieces just to make sure that they were covered well. So while all of those pieces are drying, I am going to prep all of my wood pieces. So I'm going to start by removing labels and hangers from my wood signs. And if you aren't able to find these particular signs, you could make your own using more of those wood paint stir sticks, but it just is so easy if you can find these pre-made palette signs. And the measurements on these signs that I got are 14 inches by 7¼ inches. I want these to have kind of a stained look, but I don't love using stain. I think it's messy and hard to control, especially if you want a light colored stain. So I'm going to be using just some brown craft paint and I'm going to water it down. And I'm going to kind of test it on the back of the sign to make sure I like the looks of it. And then I'm going to paint all of my wood pieces in this same color. I prefer doing it this way because it's just so much easier to clean up. I think it's easier to work with as far as getting the color that you want. It will dry lighter, and so I usually have to go over it a couple of times, but I just really prefer working with the paint as opposed to the stain. But if you like stain, definitely you can do that, or you could also paint this. And I am making sure to paint both the front and the back and all of the edges and the sides of this palette sign because it's all going to show. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the second palette sign. I also want all of my paint stir sticks to be the same color, so I am going to be painting all 9 of them with this same paint. But as you can see, I'm going over them with a little bit of sandpaper where they have some splinters and rough edges. And I will be cutting these down. I won't be using the full length. So I went ahead and left them long before painting them. And that way I kind of have a handle to hold on to. However, I will be painting one of the stir sticks the full length because that's going to be the handle of my wagon. And then I'm just going to paint them all both on the front and the back and on all of the edges. Once all of the pieces that I spray painted are dry, I did go over them with some matte finish sealer, a couple of coats of that just to make sure that the spray paint was sealed and that it wasn't going to chip off. And now I'm going to be assembling my wheels and axles for my wagon. So to do this, I am going to take 2 of the paper towel holders and I am going to place them together, just one on top of the other, so that I have the base of each paper towel holder on one on each side, and then I just have the long part sitting on top of each other. And then I'm going to zip tie those together, one on each end. And then I'll just snip off the extra part of the zip tie. And repeat that with the other 2 paper towel holders. Next, I'm going to attach my wire paper tray to the axles of my wagon, and I am lining up the front of the paper tray with the front edge of the wheels that are going to be the front of the wagon, and I am going to just use some zip ties to attach the tray to the axles. And I did center my tray in between the wheels, and there is about 1.5 inches between the paper tray and the wheels of the wagon. And this is good because this is where the wood sides of the wagon are going to go. When putting the zip ties on, you do want to make sure that the little clip part is facing down so that it's underneath the wagon because we will be placing our signboard inside the wagon and we want it to sit flat. So just make sure that those zip ties are facing down, and then once those are all attached, then just make sure they're tight and trim off the extra part of the zip tie. The great thing about these particular palette signs is that the vertical pieces of wood that stick down below the bottom a little bit will push down perfectly inside those paper towel holders, and this makes it great for assembling this and making it fit together really sturdily. Sturdily, is that a word? It sounds really funny, but I actually paused here, looked it up, and yes, sturdily is a word. So once I have one of the palette signs placed on the wagon, then I am going to use my staple gun to attach this. And you'll notice that the wire basket sits right up against the wood on those vertical pieces, both in the front and the back. And so that's where I'm going to be stapling it. Now, if you don't have a staple gun, this is where you would use like your E6000 and some clamps, and you would put some glue there and glue the wire basket to the wood palette sign and clamp it and let it dry thoroughly. But since I always say I am an impatient crafter, I like things that are fast, and so I'm going to use my staple gun. And when stapling this, I did put my little 1x2 piece of wood underneath where I was stapling. This just gave it more support so that I could press down harder and get a nice tight staple. And then I'm going to repeat the exact same thing with the other pallet sign. Now I'm going to be using those paint stir sticks to build the front and back sides of my wagon. So I'm just holding one up and measuring how long it needs to be. I'm just going to mark that with a pencil, and then I'm going to cut down all of the paint stir sticks except for the one that I painted the full length that I'm saving to use as the handle of my wagon. So I'm going to use my miter box and saw to cut down these stir sticks, and instead of cutting them one at a time, I am going to stack them four together at a time. And to hold them in place, I am going to put 1 or 2 zip ties around them just to hold them together, and then I will saw them off on the mark that I made, and then just remove the zip tie. And this makes it really easy to hold them all together so that you get a nice cut right where you need it to be. And again, all of my favorite crafting tools are linked below, like this miter box and saw. But one of my very favorite things is this little USB rechargeable handheld vacuum. This little thing is amazing for cleaning up glitter and sawdust and all of the crafty things, and it is not very expensive, so do yourself a favor, put it on your wish list for someone to get you as a gift, because you will love it. Or buy it as a gift for yourself. Okay, so now that we have those 8 stir sticks cut down to size, I am going to use some wood glue and a little bit of hot glue to attach these. And I'm going to be putting one flush with the top of my pallet signs, and then another flush with the bottom, and then I'm going to just space the other two appropriately in between. And then I will repeat this same step on the other end of the wagon to close in the box. So essentially we have created a wooden crate to put on top of these paper towel holders. So if you had a wooden crate that was about this size, you could use it and save a whole lot of steps. Next, I'm going to take that little piece of 1x2 and I am going to cut the end at an angle. And so I'm going to tip it up on its side, and then I first cut it at a 45-degree angle, but decided that this was too much of an angle. And so I did end up going back and cutting it at a lesser angle, which was 22.5 degrees on this miter box. Then I'm going to sand off any rough edges, and then I'm going to paint this with the same watered down brown paint that I used for all of the other wood pieces. Next, I'm going to position this piece of wood on the bottom of the wagon at the front, and I'm putting it so that the angle that I just cut on that is at the front of the wagon, and this is so that my handle is going to slant backwards and lean up against the front of the wagon, as you see here. Now that I have an idea of where this needs to be placed, I am going to flip my wagon over, and I'm going to use quite a few zip ties to zip tie this to the bottom of the wire paper tray so that it is nice and sturdy. once I'm happy with that, I'll just cut off the ends of the zip ties. And you can see here that I crisscrossed my zip ties over the wires on the basket, and this held my wood in place and kept it from sliding back and forth. Next, I'm going to lay my signboard down in the wire basket, and I did not attach this, I just laid it in there. Then I'm going to use some wood glue and a little bit of hot glue to attach my last paint stir stick onto that piece of wood that we just attached to the bottom of the wagon. And this is going to be the handle of my wagon. I did also add a little bit of the wood glue where the handle is up against the top of the side of the wagon there, just to give it a little bit more stability. I decided I wanted to add a cross piece to my wagon handle, so I cut a couple of pieces of the paint scraps that we had left, and I'm going to glue one on each side of the long handle that we just attached to the wagon. And then I just put some burlap in the bottom of my wagon and filled it up with various pumpkins and gourds and the corn that you buy from Dollar Tree. And I just love how this turned out. It is so perfect for fall. So I'm going to take my little reusable bag and I'm going to shorten it up. So I'm just measuring 5 inches from that bottom corner of the bag and marking that, and then I'm going to cut that off. And oh my goodness, I'm fighting with this handle. I don't know why I didn't just turn the bag over or cut it off. But anyway, I'm going to cut off the top of the bag and get rid of that. And then I'm going to be using just the bottom part of this little reusable bag. To make it a little bit easier, I'm just stuffing some plastic grocery bags. You could use newspaper or something to put in it just to kind of help it hold its shape while I'm working on it. Then I'm going to take some Mod Podge and I'm going to paint over the whole outside of the bag. And the reason I'm using this is because the bag is very slippery and slick, and I don't think that just my regular paint is going to stick to it very well. So I'm going to put on the Mod Podge first and let that dry, and then I'm going to paint over the top of the Mod Podge. So I first painted my bag with this yellow chalk paint, and I really love this color, but once I had it painted, I wasn't really happy with it for the look that I was going for. So I did end up switching it up, and my second coat of paint, I went over it using my chiffon cream or just an off-white chalk paint. But of course, you can paint this any color that you want to match your decor or the season. And of course, because I am an impatient crafter, I decided to use my heat tool to help dry this. Now, here you want to make sure that you don't get your heat tool too hot or too close to your project, because the reusable bags are made of plastic and they will melt. So that is certainly one thing to keep in mind. However, this caused something else to happen that I actually was really excited about and I was not planning. It caused my paint to crackle, and I love the effect. And I'm assuming it was because of maybe the Mod Podge underneath, but I love how that turned out. As Bob Ross would say, it was a happy little accident. Now I'm going to go over the top of this with my matte finish Mod Podge again. I'm using a matte finish because I don't want it to be shiny, but I did want to kind of protect this and maybe help the paint to stay on a little bit better. So now I'm going to take some nautical rope from Dollar Tree, and I always like to remove the tape from the ends of the rope, and then I add just a little bit of hot glue in the end and twist it around so it's nice and tight, and this will help prevent the rope from fraying. Then I'm going to use my hot glue, and I'm using my glue gun on a lower setting because I don't want to melt the plastic, but I'm going to glue the nautical rope around the top of my bag, and I'm just going to go around the bag 3 times using the rope and adding a little hot glue every so often just to secure it. I made mine during the fall time, so I filled it with all of these pumpkins, but you could use it for any season. You could also use it as a gift bag to give a gift to someone, or you could use it maybe even on your bathroom counter to put toiletries or washcloths or something in. I'm going to start by removing the glass out of 2 of these frames, and it has 2 pieces of glass in each frame, and I'm going to set those aside. And so now you just have an empty frame, and I'm going to sand the insides of the frame because I'm going to be painting on the insides. I'm not going to paint the outside, but if you were going to, you would want to sand that as well, just to rough it up a little bit so that your paint will adhere to it better. And after you sand, it's always a good idea to take a damp cloth and just wipe off any of the sawdust or residue that's left. Next, I'm going to paint the insides of my frame, and there is a groove in the center where the glass fits in. So I'm going to paint one strip on one side of that, this yellow color, and then I painted the other side of kind of a blue color, and I did this on both of my picture frames. However, I decided that I didn't love the blue color. It kind of looked a little bit more maybe like for a child's room or a baby's room, and I wanted something that would be a little bit more fall-like. So I changed up the blue and did a green color instead. And I am making sure as I go along to wipe off any paint that gets on the front of the frame. I just want it on the inside only. So now that I have the inside of both of my frames painted, I am going to glue them together, and I'm going to be gluing them together so that I have the yellow strip on the inside. So this makes like a wide stripe in the center and with the green on the outside edges. I would recommend using a glue such as E6000 or this super glue from Dollar Tree. This is a gel, and it will set up pretty quickly, so you want to make sure that you get your frames on straight pretty much the first time, because I did have a little bit of trouble with this. When I put my frame on, it set up quickly and mine was a little bit off, so it didn't want to sit flat. But this glue does work great for this. E6000 would give you a little bit more time to work with it. You could use hot glue, but I would be afraid that it would kind of pop apart because the frames are pretty smooth and slick, so that's just my recommendation. I found this pretty green ribbon at Dollar Tree that has a little leaf design on it, and I'm going to use it to cover that seam where the 2 frames meet, and just wrap that all the way around the outside of the frame, securing it with some hot glue. What I love about this project is it is so versatile. I will be able to use this for spring, for summer, and for fall. You could also add like a rope hanger to this. I'm just going to hang mine on a nail, and I added just a little bit of fall decor to it, just some berries, a couple little pumpkins, and this is just super cute. Let me show you another way to use this cute little shelf. So it was just open before, but now I'm going to use a piece of the glass and I am going to slide that back into the original slot. Then I'm going to use a little bit of Spanish moss and I'm going to arrange some berries and fall florals and a little pumpkin inside here. And these have to be small because they're going to be sandwiched in between the two pieces of glass. So I'm just going to arrange this until I like the way it looks, and then I'll very carefully slide that other piece of glass in there and it will be sandwiched in between and held in place. And I think this almost gives it an illusion of like pressed flowers, and I think it's so pretty. I hope you enjoyed these projects. If you did, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss out on any future DIYs. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a blessed day.